Welcome, everybody. Hi, I'm Sandy,
Hey,
and
everybody.
we've got David, our tour guide, with us today. I am
Yeah.
filling in for Eowyn. So, thank you for inviting me, David, to come into your 15 Nations tour. I'm really excited about tonight. And where are we?
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna try to remember we're not gonna be playing a bingo game tonight.
I know.
Andy's our
This is
bingo
it is
Friday night
kind of
bingo
cool.
host.
It's cool
And
because
usually,
we just did it, what, 2 or 3 days ago, bingo. So now
yeah, we
I'm
just
on
did
your show.
Friday
You're on
with
mine, I'm on yours. So,
yeah.
where are we at today?
Okay, well, we're wrapping up Egypt today. It's
Right?
hard to believe it's been 3 weeks. I got a little busy with some of my other projects this past period, so I didn't get to spend as much time on Egypt as I personally would like to have. So again, it's kind of hard to believe it's already been 3 weeks and it's over. Time flies. Um, but Egypt was a very interesting country to visit. We had decent results. It wasn't as depending on how you measure success, it wasn't necessarily as successful in terms of the numbers as some of our other countries. But for me, I think I probably learned more about Egypt than I've learned about many of our other countries. So let me just start by giving you a little bit of some numbers. We succeeded in connecting four of our notables. Those notables, the most recent was Anwar Sadat, which was I was real pleased with because I always like when some of the more prominent individuals get connected. Um, Anwar Sadat, for those that don't know much about Egyptian history, was a very important figure in not just in the Middle East, or not just in Egypt, but in the Middle East as a whole. He was president during the 70s and 80s. Um, Brought at least temporary peace with Israel, and then was assassinated. He was succeeded by Hosni Mubarak, and that was in I can't remember what year this was. Late 70s, I think that he. Let me see if I can see his date here. I'm having a little trouble with my screen. Give me just a second here. But anyway, and Hosni Mubarak was the president up until just recently. Probably within the last 10 years or so. So he was in for quite a while. But yeah, Sadat there, my screen is back up. Sadat was assassinated in 81, and Mubarak was president. I don't recall what year this was, but well into the 2000s. So anyway, I was glad to see that. We also have there, right where you've stopped, we have um, and I'm terrible with pronouncing names. I say this every time, but Huda Sha'awa. She was a early feminist leader in Egypt. One of the things that's fascinated me with all of our countries is the number of feminist leaders dating back to the 1800s and early 1900s. You can see there she was deceased in 1947, so her heyday was 1900 to the 1920s or so. And again, just country after country, these women that were fighting for rights all the way back in the 1800s. You think of we always, I think we're maybe taught this in school, and most countries probably are, but we always get that American centric view that America was kind of the leader in women's rights and all of those things. But we were, if not behind countries, at least right on par with a lot of them. If you'll scroll down a little bit, Sandy. There we've got Hassan Fateh. He was an architect. He had an interesting story. I told this back when we first introduced him. He There was a town in Egypt that was built on top of ancient tombs, and the villagers built their houses and then dug holes in their floors and tunneled into the tombs, basically looted the tombs, and created an entire industry selling ancient Egyptian artifacts. The government didn't like that, so they uprooted the town and moved it a couple miles over so that they couldn't dig into the tunnels anymore. And this individual here was basically the architect for the town, and he built apparently a beautiful town with all kinds of modern amenities. But what he did was, I say modern amenities, but they were modern amenities using ancient style or ancient techniques, I should say. He realized that um, modern materials such as concrete and steel did not do real well in the desert. So he went back to using adobe and other materials that had been used for centuries, built the town, but he did it in a modern way so that the people had all the luxuries that modern cities have. But the people hated it because they couldn't dig in their tunnels and get their livelihood. Basically, they had houses and everything, but they didn't have any way of making a living. So it was a very controversial situation, but an interesting story to read. Um, Under that, we've got Fareed, Simeka. He was an Olympic swimmer. We've had, Olympic athletes again with almost all of our nations, and they
That's
tend.
interesting, and it's really encouraging too because that's the Olympic spirit.
Yeah, and we do have, we haven't, publicized it too much, but we do have, an Olympic event coming up this summer, the WikiTree Games, we're calling it, and we'll be connecting various, Olympic athletes, so, I hope we're not stealing their thunder with, making these connections. Um, but again, he was an Olympic swimmer, and he is now connected. Um, Egypt, um, was a little bit easier. I'm gonna talk about Doria in just a moment, but Egypt was a little bit, easier than maybe some of the other countries because even though it's a Middle Eastern country and what we might have called a third world country back in the 1900s, they're very close to Europe. So they had a lot of connections. It didn't take much for somebody to find a Westerner to to marry with, and once with a lot of these countries that are underrepresented on WikiTree, it's real hard to make a connection within the country because we don't have the profiles to connect to. So often our task is to find a link to either the United States or Western Europe so that we can make that connection. And it's really intriguing how we can get there sometimes. It's you know some of these individuals we go through 4 and 5 countries just on one individual before we make that connection. So that's kind of an interesting thing.
For Egypt, did you find that it was mostly through Europe, the connections, or the United States,
Um,
or elsewhere?
it tends to be, and this goes for all the countries we've been to, either a direct link to the United States, sometimes a direct link to England specifically, or a link through Western Europe to the United States. Um, More often than not, it's somebody in the United States that they marry a diplomat, or their children are sent to either London or the United States for school, and either stay or marry and bring a bride back to their native land.
Mhm.
Some of the royals have done that. The the royals or the president's children, they send them off to school and they come back with a spouse. We've had a couple kings that have married European women or American women. But I'd have to, go back and actually research this, but my gut tells me that more often than not, when we have a European connection, which is the first step, that then goes to the American connection, and we get the connection there. Now, some of that's just because that's uh, w- our our top 5 members, the members that do the most work.
Mhm.
Um, I think only one is American.
Oh,
We have
interesting.
one from New Zealand. I think we have 2 from Canada. Um, And the third one, I'm drawing a blank on where he's from. I want to say Australia, but I could be wrong, and I hope I'm not leaving somebody out. But the members that have been with us from the beginning and do the vast majority of the work, um, I think I'm the only American. There may be one other American, but that's great because they're more familiar with European records and non-American records.
You've got
But
great team members. That's awesome that you guys are
yeah,
doing that.
yeah. And we've had on a couple occasions, Argentina was a good example where we had I think we had a half dozen people in Argentina that signed up. So that one got us some international and made that a really successful project. We didn't have any Egyptians sign up this time, but that's part of why we're doing this project is we probably don't have a lot of Egyptians on WikiTree, but if we can increase our Egyptian profile on or footprint on WikiTree, maybe that'll change things. So we're trying to draw in a broader international audience if we can. Um,
Well,
but if they show, good,
I know that we were talking also in bingo 2 days ago, 3 days that a lot of people might get nervous or fearful that they wouldn't be able to help with this, and that's not true. This is really something where if you love history, you love geography, you even religion comes into this, sports comes into this. um, you
yep,
mentioned a poet as well, so there's a
yep.
bunch of different types of topics that come into this, and you can dive right on in. And I will let everybody know that David's a really, really good mentor with this. And if you fear that you will not be able to know anything because you know nothing about Egypt, don't worry. That
Yeah.
you will know more.
And one thing that's real important for people to know is, first off, the members do not know until this video what our next country is going to be.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
they do not have any, you know, prior experience necessarily. If they do, it's all by chance. And I don't have any idea what I'm doing when it comes to the
Mhm.
next country. I pick it based on what I have a little bit of a formula to figure out which countries are underrepresented, which countries are practical for including. But I don't know anything. When we started Egypt, I have no idea how to do Egyptian research. That's part of the fun of this project is we figure it out. And so if you don't know, don't worry. None of us know what we're doing, country from country. And I've talked before about how I've found that we do a pattern. The first week we get kind of panicky. How are we going to
Mhm.
do this? We don't understand the language. We don't know the names. What resources are we going to use? And after about a week, it starts to fall into place, and we get on a roll, and we start figuring out, the resources and the the naming patterns and all of that, and we start connecting person after person for about a week. That's week 2, and then week 3 it tends to slow down. We've kind of exhausted our easy resources, and we spend that time um, fleshing things out, writing bios, that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of a pattern, and there's a lot of tasks that need to be done. It's not just about connecting. So if you're not comfortable with that, once somebody gets the connection made, we need people to write the bios. We need people to add stickers. We need people to make sure that our sources are formatted correctly. Perhaps finding photos, all the stuff you would do um, with any other profile. And all of the notables that we have are all on WikiTree. You can Google their names and get information for bio writing and stuff. So, so that part's fairly straightforward and easy as well. Um, but if you don't know how to do a particular country or you're intimidated by that, just realize that every single one of us is in that exact same boat. We don't know what we're doing, but we figure it out, and it's really amazing how much we know after after 3 weeks.
Afterwards. And
Um,
I might
you know,
also add that if you did not join the 15 for 15 nations at the very beginning of the year, that's okay too, because like you said, you're going to a new country where
yeah,
all of you are in the same situation. You don't know what to do or what the research is until you dig in. So have, if you're watching this, feel free to dig into the next one.
We welcome people at any point. You can jump in. Um, you don't need any kind of pre-qualifications. All you need to, as long as you're motivated, we'll take you by the hand and walk you through it. And some people just like um, join in and just watch.
Hmm.
And that's fine too. Follow the stories and stuff. That we get some really fascinating stories about these people. And when you tie all these people in, all 15 people from different walks of life, but they all tie in together. It's amazing how much, well, literally how often we connect multiple of our 15 notables, how many of them connect to each other that we had no idea.
Interesting.
They're all um they're all involved in the the key events of their nation, and they cross paths. So if they're not related by blood or marriage, they're at least related by events. So that's always interesting too. And a lot of the countries, most of these countries are newer than the United States, and they have recent revolutions and events that did tie in a lot of people that, again, even if they're not related by blood or marriage, they're related by these world events. So if you had a revolution, you've got politicians that were involved in the revolution, you've got writers that wrote about it, you've got you
Activists,
know
you've got, probably singers involved,
yeah,
maybe
yeah,
sports
people
stars
singing
got
about it,
caught
folk
up into
singers
it.
writing songs.
Yeah.
um
That's
so
a point.
and when you put those 15 stories together, you get a real good idea of the history of the country.
Mhm.
So it's that's interesting. And then two other things that come up time after time is one, you get people who are connected to other notables from their country. So, we've got a couple that I already know. I have one individual who is on this coming up, our next station, who is a composer. But his sister, I believe, was a musician, if it was a musician or artist, but his mother was also an artist. And they're both notable. So they've got their own stories that we'll uncover and elaborate on. And then the other thing is, as we mentioned, we often wind up heading back to Europe and the United States. Um, it wasn't in Egypt, but in our last country, Malaysia, we had a tribe of kind of a native tribe in Malaysia that had a daughter who married into a royal family. And won't trace the whole thing, but there was a connection then to an individual that went to Europe and married a European woman. They divorced, and she married a lawyer who was from Oklahoma, but he was in Europe doing reparations for Germany after the World War II. And his family was in Oklahoma. So here we are, starting with this tribe in Malaysia, and we end up in
Did you
Oklahoma,
make it all the
which
way
is where
back?
we made the connection. And there we're just working with the regular census records and that Oklahoma family traced back to early Virginia, I believe. So
So if you
we're
like
not.
mysteries and if you like trying to find that odd connection, this is your tour. This
Yeah,
is what
yeah,
you would
yeah.
enjoy doing this. That's
And
amazing. You went from the
it,
tribe, you
it's a
know
mystery, but it's also kind of like those old books we had as children of Find Your Own Adventure,
yes,
where you
all
could
those.
pick the next path that you want to take,
You
um, and try to solve the puzzle. It's really a lot of fun. Those of us that have been doing this from the beginning, I think we've really enjoyed this. We started this project not really knowing what we were doing. A member posted a message on G2G making a suggestion, and the WikiTree events committee kind of took the idea, gave it to me, and said, "Do something." And I had no idea what I was doing, but we put it together, and it's really evolved into something a lot of fun. We've been doing this since the first of the year, and
which
it
country does
just
this number
yeah,
that
we
you work?
haven't. Yeah.
Mrs.
So
Day.
anyway, so I wanted to mention Doria as the lead into we talk about how we learn about we're learning about um, um, history and we learn about culture. Well, one thing we learned about Egypt, we learned a lesson about Egypt. If you ever go to Egypt, stay on the first floor of your hotel room.
Oh, good tip.
Doria died falling out of her apartment window. I don't remember what floor she was on specifically. Um, some people say it was a suicide. Some say she was pushed. She had some connections to politics and perhaps knew stuff she shouldn't have known or people didn't want her to know. She was writing her memoir,
Oh,
and next thing you know, she was found dead at the um, bottom of her apartment building. Um, well, two of our other notables also fell out of their apartment windows.
oh, from Egypt.
So three of our Egyptian notables died falling out of their apartment windows. They were all connected with diplomatic areas. In fact, one of them was sick. Oh, he was appointed ambassador to Germany, I think. That's not important, but he was appointed to ambassador to. No, I'm sorry. I think he was ambassador to Syria, and he got sick, so the government sent him to London and
Who was
gave him
this?
a hotel room. And the next thing you know, he was writing his memoirs, and he fell out of his 10th floor balcony window.
Oh no.
And when the family went to collect his things, they couldn't find his memoirs. Um, Suspicious. Another one was sent to London, and he also writing his memoirs. Um, Fell out of his fifth floor balcony window. And it turns out that his son's wife, her grandfather, 40 years earlier, had fallen out of a balcony window in the same exact apartment building that he had that he had fallen out of.
And who is
So,
this?
pardon?
Who
Which
is this?
person?
Yeah.
Let's scroll up a little bit and let me see if I can. I'm not gonna remember the name. Was it? So I'm drawing a blank on who it was. Yeah, it was down below, I think,
Down below.
further
Okay.
lower.
You have a great mix. You
Well,
have
yeah,
Nobel Prize
let me
winning
look here
both.
while you're
Uh-huh.
let's see.
And that's
Um,
the end.
I'm looking for the name here. Okay, give me just 1 second. Um,
This is great though. The mix of individuals that you have, and keep in mind that these are all notables.
yes. So I try very hard to keep a mixture of people. You know, not everybody's interested in politics or sports or whatever. So um, there's you know, I do the best I can to keep. I have some guidelines I follow when locating the notables. Again, I don't know necessarily these countries, so when I'm having to pick 15 notables, I'm really starting out kind of blind. And really, what I often do is Google famous Egyptians and
And
take
start
it
with
from
that.
there. But then they've got to meet certain criteria. They can't already be on WikiTree with a connection.
Mm.
Um, they can't be. I try to keep away from living. We always put on the current leader, so that would be a living person. Some countries have a prime minister and a president, so that is um, another living person we would have. Sometimes if we have somebody very famous, that everybody would know that is not on WikiTree and connected, I will put them on as a living person. But the problem is access.
Yeah.
And if you've got living people, that are younger, their parents are often living too. So that, that creates a
A
double
challenge, yeah.
difficulty in making connections. So, and I'm scrolling through here as we're talking, trying to find the name of the individual I was
Well, we've already that's funny because
talking
we've
about. But
the Marilyn Monroe of the East, and
mhm,
she's beautiful. You can see that, and then the filmmaker was credited for starting the acting career of Omar Sharif.
mhm.
That's a notable
And
person.
she, if I remember right, no, I'm off my page, so let me go back here. Um, 1 second, I'm sorry.
No problem. I'll just scroll down her
Okay, so
page.
back at Egypt here. Um, so she was also here we go.
Oh, and
Got a
she
lot
also
of
had a
notes that are kind
Google
of jumbled.
Doodle. Now, I've got a question
Yeah,
for you. The
sure, go ahead.
Arabic names,
Okay. Hmm.
how do you do that?
So, this is it's a little controversial, I think, on WikiTree as a whole on how we do names. Um, we're supposed to put the names in the native language.
Mhm.
Now, there's a lot of problems with that. Is one, we don't speak the native language. So sometimes we can get them from Wikipedia and put them in. But if we put them in the main, um, first name, last name boxes, then those of us that don't speak Arabic can't
We'll
find
never
them.
find. Yeah.
Yeah. So we've been putting them in either as the nickname or the alternate. Um, Which also helps because then they show up as they're supposed to, because a lot of nations, they put the first name or the last name first and the first name second.
Mhm.
So when you put them in the correct boxes, they show up on the main page backwards.
Oh,
So to make it so that we can find profiles as we're working on them, we've been putting the Arabic name in the alternate name
that
box.
makes sense.
Um, Now somebody may wanna go back and change that once we get everything, once we get the research done. Um, but again, if we put it in now, we can't go back. We're not able to find the profile if we wanna go back to it or somebody else wants to find it. So that's come up with each of our countries because they all have. I don't know that we've had. I think Kenya is the only country that we've had that is primarily an English-speaking nation. Um, but we run into it, for example, with Spanish-speaking nations,
Mhm.
they're born with both the father's last name and the mother's last name, but they only use typically the father's last name when speaking to them. So you, if you put the full name in the last name box, and that's what people have to search for. But not everybody knows that that's the last name because that's not the name that they went by. So it creates a little bit of confusion. We haven't quite figured out, all the solutions for that. But typically what I do is also when you're looking at the Arabic name, if you go to Wikipedia
Mhm.
and you cut and paste it, but it doesn't divide it into first and last name.
Oh,
So I
yeah.
don't know where one begins and where one ends. So that's a
It's a try your best
yeah,
and see how it goes, but you're right, a lot of times, you won't be able to find the name
yeah,
if you search for it. And this is interesting.
so
This is another instance where a Nobel Peace Prize, first Egyptian to win a Nobel Prize for a scientific field, but born in Egypt, died in Pasadena, California.
yes, which is where I'm from. So he
And
was my neighbor apparently.
it's interesting. But that also goes to the point of don't be afraid to join this 15 Nations tour because you'll find it a little bit easier to navigate than you think for some of them.
Yeah. Well, right, and so he came to America, when he worked at Caltech. So his family is all now in Southern California. We weren't able to make a connection because most of his family,
Still living.
he wasn't that old. He was born in
Yeah.
'46, so his kids were probably born in the '70s and '80s. So access to records on who they married and that stuff is not available. But down the road, as time goes on, that may be where a connection comes in. Um, and that's a good example of how it can seem intimidating, but very quickly we're in Pasadena, California, not in Egypt doing research. So there's that comes up a lot. One of the connections, and it took me a little while to find it, but Hind Rostam right above him. We didn't find many connections with her, but if you go up to the top, we have
Mhm.
a Sayed Darvish. I think he's the third on our list here,
There you go.
and he was a musician. They made a biography film about him, and she played his wife in the film.
Oh, really?
So again, just a total coincidence that she played the wife of one of our other notables. So those connections are always kind of fun too. And when you're reading about people and you're reading their story and other names come up and you're like, oh, I know that person, because you've been doing your other research. Um, so Egypt, we had four connections I mentioned, and
Mhm.
we had 122 um, new profiles, new Egyptian profiles that we added,
Well, that's
which
great.
is actually on the low end for us. Usually we've gotten up into the 400s, but 122, it's up there with some of the other countries. But that's 122 Egyptian profiles that are now on WikiTree that were not there 3 weeks ago. So that's really what our
That's
from the overall
beautiful.
WikiTree standpoint, that's our goal, is to get these on there. So now when Egyptian families or Egyptian individuals come on to WikiTree, they have a better chance of making a connection directly through Egypt as opposed to having to find that Western connection.
And I think for all of us, a lot of times when we come on to genealogy sites as well, that we're not only looking to see if somebody's already added our family, but added our notables. There's certain notables that we
Mhm.
all look for depending on your hobby or what movie star you liked or what singer you like. So we tend to do that. And this would be great because if they come on to WikiTree and they see some of their notables and how respectfully they've been added to WikiTree, hopefully that'll encourage them to join and continue.
Yeah. And the opposite, if somebody from Egypt comes on wanting to, not necessarily in Egypt, but an Egyptian in America or somewhere in Western Europe, and they want to join WikiTree, and they start searching for Egyptian profiles and they find zero, probably not going to stick around a whole long
Yeah.
time. So that's really one of the primary purposes of this program, is to get um, eventually all of the nations to have at least some sort of profile, so that people can see, even if maybe don't have a huge number of Egyptian profiles, we've got some, and the ones that they're going to recognize are their notables. Do you have their leaders like Nasser and Sadat? Um, if you've got all kinds of American notables, you've got all kinds of Western European notables, where are their notables?
Mhm.
And if you don't have them, they may not feel that that's the right place for them.
Wouldn't feel welcome, but now that they see that we're adding them,
Mhm.
then they might stick around a little bit.
Yeah,
Where would you like to
and
go
help grow
next?
the tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where would you like to go next, David, on your tour?
Okay, so let's head on over. Before we go to the next country,
Mhm.
let me give you a little bit of story on why we're doing this next country, because it was not my original intention to do this country. We're going to Central America. That I had pretty much made up my mind on quite a while back. I'm trying to get all the regions of the world, kind of moving back and forth, and Central America was next on my list. And after doing some number crunching and figuring out which countries are represented well and which ones are not, I came up with Guatemala as my first choice. And I was all set to do it. And I started
Mhm.
looking for qualified notables because I need to find 15 notable Guatemalans who are primarily deceased, who do not have WikiTree profiles, and who are, generally going to be names that we can use, but also some diversity. I don't want to just do all Guatemalan presidents. I could not find 15 famous deceased Guatemalans that were diverse enough for this project. So Guatemala got scrapped.
Oh,
So then I went to Nicaragua, same thing. Costa Rica, same thing. El Salvador, same thing. Now I could find modern notables, lots of soccer players, other sports heroes, some celebrities, but they were all living, and not only living but young living, which means that their parents were probably living as well. Um, so the odds that we were going to be able to find grandparents that were deceased, when we don't have access to the parents' records, that wasn't going to work. I went through country after country. I finally ended up with a country where I could get 15 interesting notables,
are you ready to
and
announce?
it wasn't my first, second, third, or fourth choice, but if you want to pull it up,
Okay, here you guys
the next
go.
country is going to be, let's scroll to the top
Let's
so they can see the
go.
name, is Panama.
I'll
We're
pretend
going to
like
Panama.
I'm Mags now. There you go.
Yeah. Now, the reason I was a little um, avoidant of Panama as my choice is because Panama, for the most part, was part of the United States for a while. Not necessarily technically or legally, but for all practical purposes, when we were building the canal, they were, what you might call a puppet of the United States. So I was a little concerned that it was going to be too American centric and not enough of our foreign purpose. But that turned out not to be the case. There is a whole lot of information about Panama that I didn't know. The Panama Canal was a very important part of their history, but a small part of their history. So we have a good selection of people, but I've mentioned several times that I have rules that I try to follow in picking my um, 15 notables. And every single time I wind up having to throw those rules out the window because I can't make them work. This time I threw, I think, just about every rule out the window. So as I go down the list introducing you to our notables, I'm going to explain on many of them why they're on the list, even though they might not typically have been on the list. Um, one of the things that we're also going to be experiencing this time is we're going to go a lot further back in time than we tend to. I often have one or two notables that go back to the 1800s, but this time we're going to have several that date back into the 1800s, and we'll see how that works. I don't know anything about Panamanian records. I don't know what's out there and not out there. A lot of these are they're going to be Spanish records. Um, so we'll see. But again, because in order to get 15 people, I had to go a little further back in time than I would normally do. The very first one here, um, Thomas de Herrera. He was the president of the state of the Isthmus and the Republic of New Granada. Now, neither one of those is Panama. They are precursors to Panama. So he qualifies because it technically was Panama, but the state of the Isthmus, which Panama is the Isthmus of Panama, that was a nation that lasted 13 months,
Hmm.
and he was the leader of that nation. Um, Afterwards, it became the Republic of New Granada. Now, you'll find when we start studying the history, if you're not familiar with Central America and their history, it was a lot like old Europe. Countries and borders changed all the time. Panama was part of Colombia. It was state of the Isthmus. It was New Grenada. It was a like I said, not a colony of the United States, but overseen by the United States for a while. It's had a number of different um, formations. The first president of what we know now as Panama is Manuel Amador Guerrero, and I almost always try to put the first modern leader on there as one of our notables, and in this case, this is he. But there was Panama had a long history before him, but he's the first one in the line of what's considered the modern presidency. Amelia Denise, I don't know if she pronounces it Dennis or Denise, but Dennis is what it looks like. That's a last name, Amelia Dennis de Icaza. She was a poet. Um, a lot of our feminist leaders, which is what she was, are also poets. That seemed to be the way women got their messages across 1800s was through poetry. So I don't know a lot about her, but she was a feminist leader um, and the first woman to have her poetry published, first Panamanian woman to have her poetry published. Now, um, Narcisco Garay, and I spelled his name wrong there, so I'm gonna have to take it out. There's no second C in it. Um, he was a composer and a diplomat. Now, there's not a lot of information on him, and I don't know that he himself was that prominent of a figure, but he's the one I mentioned earlier. He had a sister who is a notable and a mother who is I'll call her a semi-notable. She's not on Wikipedia, but you can Google her name and find out information about her. She was an artist, considered one of Panama's leading artists, but she doesn't have a Wikipedia page for whatever reason. So she's, like I say, kind of a semi-notable, maybe not officially, but
Mhm.
unofficially. So I put him on there because with three different notables in the family, I thought that would be an interesting one to try to see where we can go with it. Um, Similarly, Arnulfo Arias Madrid, he was a president of Panama. He was a president three times. Each time he got thrown out by a coup and then came
Oh,
back. He had another coup, came back, had another coup. So kind of a rocky political career. The reason I put him there, he married a young woman. I believe she was a teenager at the time. He was many decades older than her. Um, Long after his death, she became the first female president of Panama.
interesting.
Now she's still alive, so I didn't want to put her on because we're trying to keep away from the living people. But by connecting him, we'll have her connected as well. So, but that's an interesting story. Like I said, she was just a young teenager that married this man and then rose to the presidency herself. So that'll be interesting to follow up on that. Here's one of our Olympic stars, Adelaide Lambert. Again, there's a misspelling there. I got to go back and do
Mhm.
some proofreading. Um, Olympic swimmer in the 1920s. Um, I believe the first Panamanian woman to win a medal in the Olympics. I find Olympic athletes fun to do, so I
Mhm.
tend to put them on whenever I can.
And there's lots of information too, so it makes it a little
Yeah,
easier, and you get
yeah,
engrossed in their stories.
yeah. During the or you can go to the Olympic website and they have all the athletes. You scroll up a little bit
Yeah, I did. Sorry
farther,
about
but
there.
Edward A. Murphy. This is an interesting one, I think. He was an aerospace engineer, but he is the person that Murphy's Law is named after. Murphy's Law is if anything can go wrong, it will go wrong. Now, I just read a little bit about him, and the law that he actually created was basically and worded differently, and I can't quote it here, but basically the message was be prepared for anything to go wrong. So if something can go wrong, it will is kind of a twist on the original idea. The original idea was as an aerospace engineer, be prepared for anything to go wrong. Don't assume that it's not going to go wrong because it may. So it was intended as a good advice, not as a pessimistic, um, um, saying that we use it today. And he was a little discouraged by that, but he'll be interesting to do as well. And I believe, well, no, I'll go back to that. The next one is Lloyd LeBeach. He's also an Olympic athlete, and he was the first Central American to win a gold medal in the Olympics. He was a sprinter. Carlos Fuentes, I don't know a lot about him, but he is a very prominent novelist, Panamanian novelist. Well, no, I take that back. He was born in Panama. He's considered a Mexican novelist. His
Hmm.
parents were Mexican, and he lived in Mexico in his later years, but he was born and raised in Panama. So even though everything that you read will say that he was a Mexican novelist, which he was, but he was also Panamanian. So he made my list there. Um, Omar Torrijos Herrera. Couple of things on him. First off, his last name Herrera. We had a Herrera at the top of the list. I have no idea if they're married, if they're connected or not. That'll be interesting to find out if there's connection. It's a fairly common name, so they may not be, but that would be interesting to find out. He was technically a president of Panama, but he didn't go by the name president. He went by something like Grand Leader. He was kind of a dictator. He took a little more power than the typical president. But the reason that he's important is he was president during the negotiations with the United States to hand the Panama Canal back over um, to Panama. So he's the one that did the negotiations with Jimmy Carter and got that arranged. A lot of people probably recognize Manuel Noriega. Um, Not the best of individuals.
Hmm.
But one thing when I'm looking at choosing my figures, I'm looking for people that had a historical impact, not necessarily good or bad. Um, he played a very prominent role throughout the 80s. He was, again, a dictator, not the nicest of dictators. Once he was out of office, the United States went down to Panama and captured him and arrested him and brought him back to the United States for trial on drug charges. Spent several years in a Florida prison before being returned back to Panama, where he spent time in prison down there. So, not the best of human beings, probably, but a very important person in Panamanian history. Now, I mentioned that I try to stay away from living people. I could not find 15 deceased Panamanians um, that fit our criteria. So we have 4 living people this time, which is more than I prefer, but there's some interesting names you'll probably recognize, starting with Rod Carew,
Hmm.
very famous baseball player. He played for the Angels and the Twins. Um, I'm from Southern California, so he was a huge star when I was growing up in our town. Um, a name I haven't heard. I'm not sure what he's doing now. He's probably retired, living off all of his baseball money. He did coach for quite a while afterwards, but he is born and raised in Panama. Um, and another sports hero, Roberto Duran,
Hmm.
very famous boxer. Also retired and living off his wealth, I'm sure. Um, I will try to get some parents connected to them. If somebody else finds the parents, you can let me know and I can connect them to the profile. If you'd like to actually work on the bio itself, drop me a note and I can work with you on get you on the trusted list so that you can um, make some changes there. But if we can get the parents on, then we should be able to work on the tree without having to worry about that. Um, Laurentino Cortez, he is the current president of Panama. And as I said, I always put the current president. The person that initially posted on G2G that she would like us to do a program like this, what her initial idea was is to just do the leaders of all the nations of the world, the current leaders.
Hmm.
And that sounded like a great idea until you realize all the current leaders are living which means nobody would have access to any of their profiles. So we expanded this into something that was more doable, but in honor of her original idea, I always do include the current leader or leaders of the country. And then the final one is Miguel Bose. He is a famous pop singer and actor from Panama. Um, I chose him in part because he is very prominent in Panama, if not beyond. But also, he has his mother was a well-known actress. I want to say from Italy, and his father is a very famous Spanish matador. So his tree is going to take
Mhm.
us directly to Spain and Italy, if I'm correct on that. And his
That's interesting.
parents are both notables and have their own bios that we can develop from. So again, like I said, we got a very diverse group, some interesting stories. I've done very little preliminary research, so I'll be learning about these people along with the rest of you. Um, and we'll see where I think this one is going to be one of our easier ones because it is a nation that's close to the United States. It's a nation that the language, although they speak Spanish, many of us know a little bit of Spanish, but if not, at least the alphabet is the same.
Mhm.
We can make out the words, unlike the Arabic or the Malaysian languages that we've had to work with. Um,
It's a
so we'll
great
see.
mix too. You have just a
Yeah,
really, really great mix of notables that you pick from. So there's something for everybody.
yeah. And again, as we said earlier, if you're not
Yeah.
familiar with, you don't know Panamanian genealogy, none of us do. I'm springing this on everybody brand new right now. So our team is going to start tonight. It is not unusual for somebody to make a connection before the first night is out.
Oh wow.
That has happened on, I'd say, probably half of our countries because our team gets in there right away and starts figuring things out. Now, usually that's somebody who's got either an American or Western European connection, pretty, a mother or a father or somebody. Um, but we've had at least once or twice where somebody's parents or grandparents are already on WikiTree, or the ex spouse or something like that, and one connection, and we've got them connected, which um, is always a surprise. Um, and I do not post this publicly until tomorrow on Tuesday mornings. People that watch the video get a head start. If you watch the video late, you can still get that head start. There is no link currently to this page, but if you go to any of our other countries, for example, Egypt, and in the address bar, replace Egypt with Panama, it'll take you right to the place.
Well, we
If you
dropped
see,
it
I
in
try to
chat.
get everything, pardon?
We dropped it in chat too. So
Oh,
they'll be
okay.
able to
So
see
there
those,
you go.
only those that are watching will be able to get
Yeah,
that.
only those that are watching. If you don't tune in, you got to wait till Tuesday morning. Sometimes if I sleep in Tuesday afternoon, but but everything should be open. If there's a lot of little pieces to this um, that I have to take care of before it's open. So if you find something that's locked, a profile that I forgot to open the privacy level on, a picture that's not loading, a link that's not working, send me a notice because as the profile manager and as a project leader, I can see things that other people can't. So there have been times where I see all the pictures and nobody else can, but I don't know that. So or I've got access because I'm profile manager. I'm not realizing that the profile's locked and nobody else has access. So please let me know if there's anything that's out of order, anything that I forgot to open. Um, we do have a Discord conversation that stays very active. Our G2G doesn't, our G2G is being used primarily for general information, but the nitty gritty of our research process tends to be shared in Discord. And so you can head over there, and if you can't find us, let me know, and I'll help you locate us. Um, and it's a real good group. It's a real fun group to work with. So again, if anybody is new and wants to pop in, pick a profile and start working. If you need some guidance, drop us a note and we'll tell you where you can begin.
And like you said, definitely drop in the Discord. You can get almost instant answers on Discord.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There seems to be somebody there at all times, and most people check in at least a couple times a day. So if you don't get an answer right away, at least by the end of the day, you should have a response.
That sounds good. Well, then I guess everybody
Mhm.
has their passports ready, and the next stop, Panama.
Yeah, and I think we're right. This is our halfway point.
Oh, great.
So we're gonna start counting down as we move along. I'm not sure. I've got some things people have asked me. We got some things in the works for once this is done. I'm not ready to announce it yet because I don't want to commit myself to something and then not do it. But I'm working with a couple others on kind of a permanent project going into next year. So this will take us till November.
And
Um,
that's WikiTree Day time.
at WikiTree Day, and so we're scheduled to wrap up the 15 nations with our 15th nation in time for WikiTree Day. But we got some ideas for how to continue it afterwards. If anybody has ideas they'd like to share, I'm always open to that as well.
That sounds great. Well, I guess we will let
Okay.
everybody get working on Panama. And remember, go to Discord, reach out to David. Don't be shy, jump on in, and make sure that you watch the YouTubes, the live cast here for the 15 Nation Tour, because that's how you find out before everybody else where we're going next.
That's
Well,
right.
thanks, David, for letting me crash
Okay.
your
Well,
tour
thank
here.
you for joining us.
And I
Pleasure.
will see
Pleasure.
you guys at bingo, or I'll
Okay.
pop into the 15 Nation tour.
Yeah, we'd love to have you. Okay. And thank you
Bye,
for
guys.
everybody for tuning in. Bye bye.